Hi there, my name is Renee Hobbs and welcome to another Media Smart webinar. Tonight we are delighted to be featuring Frank Baker, the legendary architect of the Media Literacy Clearinghouse. And he's going to be talking to us about books that every learner should know, media literacy books for every learner. But before we begin, I'm hoping that if you're participating tonight, that you can introduce yourself to us. And so I see Elizaveta Friesem. I see you there. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interests? Lisa?
Sure. I am an affiliated faculty of Media Education Lab. I recently got my PhD from Temple University in Media and Communication. I focus on media literacy education and issues of diversity, more specifically gender and sexuality. And I'm excited to add the books that Frank is going to talk about to my to-read list.
Your to-read list.
Yes.
Yeah, you're going to love some of these books. Zoe, I see that you have joined us this evening. Welcome and thanks for joining in. You're also affiliated with the Media Education Lab. Can you talk a little bit about your research and professional interests in media literacy education?
Sure. Hi, my name is Zoe Wang. I am a PhD student at University of Rhode Island and a member of the Media Education Lab. I am interested in media literacy, youth media and creativity, as well as intercultural communication and international media literacy. Yeah, I really look forward to this webinar tonight.
Well, I am delighted to introduce you to Frank Baker. Frank Baker and I met some 30 years ago when he was working in the Orlando Public Schools. He was a champion of media literacy there, a legendary teacher librarian and media specialist with a background in television news, I might add, as a can I say this? Are you the meteorologist?
I only played one on TV.
You played one on TV. But since then, he's gone on to be a leading professional development specialist, offering educational programs for K-12 teachers all over the country, and having a big effect in particular on the social studies community, the language arts community, and the library, the school library community. So Frank, you've done incredible work in your career providing professional development to K-12 teachers everywhere. But I know you have a special interest in books about media literacy. Can you tell us a little bit about where your interest in media literacy books came from?
Thank you, Renee. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this webinar because I think this is very important. I've been doing workshops like you with educators for almost 20 years. And most of those workshops were in school library media centers. And I think a large portion of our audience tonight might be those librarians who maintain collections at schools and other locations. So I would get to my professional development workshop location and take a few minutes to scan the bookshelves to look for books about media. I was looking for books about photography or books about radio or television. And, you know, surprisingly, I found little, if any. And it really surprised me. And so I started the Media Literacy Clearinghouse website. And I decided that what I would do would be to try to recommend to teachers of all grades books that I discovered as I would go to conferences around the country. Those could be in South Carolina where I reside or national conferences. And to try to get the exhibitors and the publishers to recognize how important it is, I still think, to have books in print that a young person could pick up and read because he or she wants to know more about a particular topic. So that's the way it started. And, you know, fortunately for me, I've been all over the country, and I've done lots of conferences like you have. And I really valued the time to walk through an exhibit hall and see how many publishers are devoting time and space to books about media and media literacy.
Frank, do you think that maybe you inspired publishers to create some of the books that you're about to share with us tonight? Is that a fair thing to say, that by you kind of pestering them, going, wow, isn't that interesting? You know, there are no books about understanding radio, understanding the internet, understanding films. Do you think that you might have inspired publishers to essentially develop some of these books?
I'm not sure that I could, thank you, Renee. I'm not sure I can say that I inspired them, but I think I've inspired teachers who want to teach these topics to go back and say to their school librarian, why don't we have books about X, Y, or Z? Why don't we have a book about Gordon Parks, the famous African-American photographer, the first photographer for Life magazine, the first fashion photographer for Vogue, African-American, and the first African-American director of his own life story and of the movie Shaft. I mean, so there are literally hundreds of books, and the challenge that you gave me tonight through this webinar is to just come up with some that we can recommend and to get our audience thinking about what's in my collection, what do I need, what do I not need, what are the standards that my teachers are supposed to be teaching, and again, maybe some people on this webinar are saying, you know, I don't need any books. I've got the internet. I've got TED Talks. I've got YouTube, but I still like the idea that there are publishers out there devoting time and space, and there are authors, as you will find out shortly, who are writing about media issues, and media literacy.
And you know, that's a great segue to take it away. I know that the list that you're about to share with us has fiction and nonfiction titles, and that makes it even more interesting. And I know that you've been thinking about books for every learner, from the youngest preschoolers all the way up to the college undergraduates. So let's get started. Take it away.
Thank you, Renee. Okay.
And Elaine, we welcome you. We see you've joined us. We hope you're listening. We're welcoming you to our webinar tonight as well.
So I'll start right here with our websites and our email addresses, because it's my experience that participants may want to ask us a question long after the webinar. So Renee runs the Media Education Lab at the University of Rhode Island, and there's her email address. I run the Media Literacy Clearinghouse, and there is my email address. So let's see how we advance these slides. Okay, here we go. So I run the Media Literacy Clearinghouse, and if you don't already know about it, I hope that you will bookmark it, because it's the website I started many years ago. And I'll start right here with my most recent book called Media Literacy in the K-12 Classroom, that is published by ISTE. And it's one of those books that I'm very proud of, because it introduces media literacy and the topics of visual literacy, advertising, and moving images. Okay, so I mentioned that my website has all of these categories. Here's one of them, photography and visual literacy. And you'll notice the red arrow down in the lower left-hand corner points to a section where you could find out what are the recommended text. So the questions that I have for you all is, what do you want your students to learn? How is media represented in your teaching standards? What text do you currently have in your collection? What text do you not have that you need or want? How do you determine when a text is appropriate, whether it's good? Do you read those reviews? Do you depend on those reviews? And lastly, I want to say the media specialists, and I've said this for more than 20 years, they are one of the strongest partners we have in teaching media literacy and also acquiring these texts. So I'll start right here with preschool. This is an oldie but a goodie. In media literacy, we talk about how much time do young people spend with media? And the answer is they don't have a clue. So here's a book by Random House, The Berenstain Bears, still very popular with parents. And the book is called Too Much TV. So what happens when kids sit in front of the screen? Well, most of us already know. And so this is a great way to start the preschool age. Learner publishing has just published this series of books, and all of them deal with advertising. And I think this is really good because advertising is huge in the lives of all of us. But how do we get young people started at an early age? And so here are 6 books, and there's already there's a link at the bottom of the page to an existing teacher guide. And so if you haven't read the reviews of these series, look at the teacher guide. I think a teacher guide would tell you immediately, well, gee, this is really well done and well designed. And so that's my suggestion. Capstone Press, which is the publisher of my other book, is I'm so happy that they have jumped on the media literacy bandwagon. So here's a series for preschool. 4 books in this series, learning about ads, learning about media literacy, learning about fact and opinion, and learning about privacy. Now, who would have thought we could teach, K1, 2 about privacy? We can, and we should. And these are huge issues in 2016, and so I'm glad that Capstone Press has started it. So let me go on. Learner Publishing has, this is a relatively new book called Identify and Evaluate Advertising. So here we're now looking at the upper elementary grades and the middle school grades. Again, here's a teacher guide that they've offered. And I've even pulled out a section of this book. Is it an article or an ad? And that's really huge today for young people to be able to distinguish between what is journalism and what is advertising. Now, I don't remember if this book actually addresses what's called native advertising, but I guarantee you native advertising is going to be, it already is huge in journalism and advertising communities. And so this is a great way to introduce advertising to young people and get them to start recognizing where is the ad in what I am reading. Learner Publishing. Continuing with advertising, Capstone Press has a series called Let's Think About, and this one is on the power of advertising. Interestingly enough, the cover, you can use the cover of a book as a great way to introduce media literacy. So what do you see on the cover? Times Square, New York. Well, Times Square, New York doesn't look like any other place in the world, but that's the cover image that they decided. So you can see from a couple of pages that I've pulled out here that we have a little history of advertising with the black and white photo on the left, and then on the right, the question, what do you think? I love that when they engage a question within the text. Here's another one on advertising. This one is of interest level grade 6 and above. Debating the issues, advertising. Does advertising tell the truth? And I pulled this particular picture out of this chapter because it shows a NBA basketball player wearing a particular sneaker. And the issue here is that the release of these sneakers actually caused some violence. And so getting students to think about what is the effect of a particular message, what is the impact? And we've actually had people killed over products. And so, again, this is a great discussion starter, I think. Our colleague Sherry Graydon in Canada has written and revised Made You Look, How Advertising Works and Why You Should Know. So the interest level is ages 11 and above, and so we're talking about grade 6 and above. And this is a very good book. I can highly recommend Made You Look. And I pulled this review from The Guardian in the UK. The thoughtful and balanced presentation, the clear explanations, and entertaining real-life examples are a solid starting point for getting children and adults to think critically about the way that products are advertised. Careers. Recently, I created this website on my webpage because I realized, why are young people in school? They're there to learn, to maybe decide about a career path. And I realized there are a lot of books out there. I don't have a particular book to recommend here, but what I've done is created this website which lists books under each icon. So there's general media, there's advertising, there's arts, there's film, gaming, you get the idea. And so I hope that you'll take a look at the careers website that I have built. Film. Let me talk about film for a moment. I know that Common Core is huge in the majority of the states, and I've pulled out 2 specific standards in Common Core ELA that talk about film. So I'm going to introduce film here by using these 2 grades 7 and 8 standards. So we're analyzing the effect of the techniques. Are young people even aware of the techniques in film? And grade 8, evaluating the choices made by directors or actors. So the books that I'm about to introduce would be helpful in meeting that particular standard. So every film that is released, just about every film, has its own companion making of or the behind the scenes of the making of a particular film. So let me dive into a few of these. Brian Selznick, who wrote the graphic novel on which the film Hugo is based, he wrote the Hugo movie companion. And among other things, this book published by Scholastic includes a sample of the screenplay. How often do students see or work with screenplays? And he even talks about the guy that has the camera attached to him. Okay, and then there is Martin Scorsese, the director, collaborating with his editor. I really love this book because it takes you behind the scenes into how this particular film is made. And there are lots of books like this, but this one is particularly good. Next, The Wimpy Kid Movie Diary. And who doesn't love the Wimpy Kids? Well, I like this one too because they went all the way through. How did they choose the actors for the film? How did they choose the locations to film it at? How did they make the cheese look so yucky on the side of the road? All of those things. Storyboard sketches, costume design, and more. Kids would love this. So now let me jump up to high school. Abdo Books has a series called How to Analyze the Films of Spike Lee, Tim Burton, the Coen brothers, and Quentin Tarantino. Now, I love these books, especially if you're studying these films and these film directors, but you may not be. But that shouldn't be a reason not to acquire them because you know your students love to watch films in lots of different ways today. So this is a way to go deeper into the mind of the director, thinking about investigating how he, in this particular case, he approaches a particular subject that he's presenting. Here's a relatively new book called How to Make a Movie in 10 Easy Lessons. Because we know students today have iPads, they have mobile phones, they are already filmmakers, but they haven't had the lessons. So here's a nice book to introduce them to how to make a movie. And I like books that help students understand how to make, the creation part. So when we're talking about media literacy, we talk about both analyzing media messages and creating it. So this particular book is really about creating. So I'll skip ahead to Digital Filmmaking for Kids. This is part of the Dummies series published by Wiley. So again, this is designed for kids who want to make their own movie but don't know how to get started. This is another one, Digital Filmmaking for Kids, for grades 7 and above. School Library Journal gave this one a really nice review. Like that one. Here's one of my favorite books, which is really more than a book, it's a kit. So you've got a CD with sound effects, you've got storyboard templates, lots of interesting things in the Movie Maker kit. Now notice that this is for grade levels 3 through 7. Going back to film, Michael Weiss books really go deep into films. So this is a series of paperbacks. They are very thin, maybe 100 or 140 pages. Shoot Like Spielberg, I pulled an excerpt out from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it deconstructs a particular scene in the movie and gives you film stills so that you can analyze those. I really like this series of softbound books. Media history. The social studies standards nationally and in most states include analyzing the rise of mass media in history. And so here's a series of books by Smart Apple Media for the upper elementary, middle grades. Would be a great addition to a library. The Great Moments in Media series includes the history of the internet, the history of newspapers, the history of radio, and the history of television. Now, when I see Sesame Street on the cover of Television History, I begin to wonder, well, what else did they cover in this book? Did they cover, 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination? Well, let's consider that the reading level is upper elementary and middle grades. I don't know, but I hope that you'll investigate the Great Moments in Media series. Here's a graphic novel that is very well done by someone who you might recognize. Brooke Gladstone is co-producer and co-host of the NPR series called On the Media. And she's written a fascinating book called The Influencing Machine, published by Norton. And so I pulled a page out of the book. Here's a page called Objectivity. Whether you're teaching journalism or teaching media or teaching social studies or English language arts, this is a book that ought to be in your student shelf, and it ought to be in your professional collection as well. Continuing with media history, ABC Clio has the book, The 100 Media Moments That Changed America. And Booklist gave this one a really good review. And I like this one as well, because students can go back in time and read the backstory of all of these events. So media history. So now I'm going into media and history. So here are two books about the Dust Bowl Through the Lens on the left, Children of the Dust Bowl by Crown Publishers, and The Crowd Goes Wild by Sourcebooks and Media Fusion includes audio CDs. So we're basically taking the events as they happened and put them on CDs. So this is a book with CDs. So here's another one. We interrupt this broadcast, which was a phrase, I don't know that we hear that phrase much anymore, but in the early days of radio and television, this is what we heard. So these are the actual broadcasts of the Hindenburg, of the moon landing, of Lee Harvey Oswald being shot, 9/11. Similarly, World War II on the Air features Edward R. Murrow, the first broadcast journalist, and this is a collection of his broadcasts. And I think all students ought to know who Edward R. Murrow is, because he was around during World War II and beyond. Okay, media literacy. Here's a series by Capstone Press for middle grade students. The Big Push, Popular Culture, Choosing News, What Gets Reported and Why. This is a really good question. What news does not get reported? What's not in the news that you read? Selling Ourselves, Marketing Body Images, and Violence as Entertainment, Why Aggression Sells. So I really applaud Capstone Press. I think they've recognized how important these particular topics are for the grade level that these books are aimed at. Okay, this is the Capstone Press Fact Finder series. Several years old now, but there are 6 books in this series. I'm the proud author of Coming Distractions, Questioning the Movies. And what I like about these books, ladies and gentlemen, is in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, each of the books includes these key media literacy questions. What's media literacy about? It's about critical inquiry, getting young people to ask questions about what they see, read, and hear. And so these 5 questions are the centerpiece of each of these books. Again, the grade level is elementary, but I think I was at a middle school recently and walked in the door, and the middle school teacher pulled them out. And I said, wait a minute, these books are for younger. She said, you don't understand. I have lots of students who don't read at grade level. So we have lots of books below their grade level. Surprised me. I was happy to see them there. So here's a newer series from Cherry Lake Publishing, asking questions about media. And so you can see there are 8 titles in this series. We're asking questions about body image and advertising, food advertising, how Hollywood movies get made, how the news gets created, political campaigns. That would be a very popular book for the next 6 months as we lead up to the to November. Video games, popular culture, and what's on television. Cherry Lake Publishing, again for the upper elementary grades and middle school, asking questions about media. Rosen Publishing has this series of books. Again, I like it when I see a publisher recognizing things like digital citizenship, privacy, sharing digital information. These are the things that are so very important to young people today, and they're part of that digital literacy curriculum. So these types of books would be, I think, very good additions for you to consider for your collection. Hot Topics in Media, back to Abdo Publishing. Banned books, body image, graphic novels, violence in video games, reality television, parental guidance ratings. Do students even know what ratings mean in television and movies? I mean, we see PG, but do we really know what that encompasses? So a book like this would be a great starting point for young people, for teachers, and for parents, I think. Continuing with media literacy, this is the Getting the Message series by Smart Apple Media. And this takes you deep into topics. I'm particularly fond of the book called Political Messages and Propaganda. You know, I think today propaganda is confined in most states and curriculum to social studies to World War I and World War II. Well, propaganda surrounds us. And it's past time that we get young people to recognize how important propaganda is and how much it's so pervasive in our world. So I can highly recommend this series. Here's another series, Behind the Scenes. I love behind the scenes. So behind the scenes of a newscast. I worked in television news. I would love to have taken young people at the time behind the camera because they never get to see what happens behind the scenes. Who are the people? Behind the scenes of an animated television show, a music video, or a movie set. So you actually see a page from the book on the movie set, and we see the characters in costume getting ready to do their part. So the reading level and the grade level, interest level are grade 4. Media and politics. So I couldn't do this webinar, Renee, without recommending my own book. And I pulled out the table of contents here because I wanted the librarians and the others who are part of the webinar to know that the way I approached this topic was through the history of media. For example, Chapter 4, Analyzing Photographs. How did a photograph of Abe Lincoln help get him elected? How powerful was radio at the time it was invented? Well, it was very powerful. And then when we look at television and political advertising and analyzing campaign events, so we look at stagecraft, and the role of new media and new technologies. And last but not least, and this has been a big topic this year, if you've been following the news, how do we fix the problem of money in elections? Because it's a huge problem. So at the bottom of the page is a link to my website, which is a companion to the text where I'm adding even newer information. Here's one of my favorite books on the topic of visual literacy. It's called Photos Framed. And the author here presents photos, but asks you to look closely, to look deeper, to do a close read of these images. And I think this particular approach is very important for young people today. Another popular series is Capstone Press's Captured History series. This is the first 6 books in the series. Each book takes a particular iconic image and tells the reader the story of the image. How did the image come to be taken? What was the photographer doing or thinking about at the time? How did the picture come to be published? How has it become so popular over time? Here are some other books in the series, and you can get an idea of the topics that they have addressed in this series. I just love this series. I've recommended another topic to them, but they haven't taken me up on it. It's the oil-stained pelican from the Gulf oil spill. I think when the oil spill pelican appeared on news magazines and in fronts of newspapers, our awareness level was raised about the huge tragedy of the Gulf oil spill. Hopefully they'll take my recommendation. Visual literacy. I mentioned Abraham Lincoln and covering him in my own book. So here's the first of a couple of books. This one's called Lincoln Through the Lens. Publisher is Walker Children's Book. So again, we're looking at Abe Lincoln through photographs that were taken throughout his lifetime. Here's another one called Picturing Lincoln by Clarion Books. Visual literacy. National Geographic for Kids has a great softbound book, A Guide to Photography, because young people today are, like I said, photographers. Aperture has published, or is about to publish, these two books, Go Photo, an activity book for kids, and the book on the right is called Seeing Things, a guide to looking deeper at photographs. Aperture Books. Biographies. Mac Made Movies, The Boy Who Invented Television, and Edward R. Murrow. These are just 3 books that you might consider for your collection. The Lumiere brothers, who were at the early days of moving images. The great photographer Dorothea Lange is part of a series called Aperture Masters of Photography. And I mentioned earlier Gordon Parks, the African-American photographer. So here's a book about Gordon Parks from Albert Whitman and Company. And Renee, I think that's the end.
Frank, what an incredible set of choices you have curated for us today. That was breathtaking, and I kind of didn't want it to end. That was so intriguing.
Well, I will say, for anybody that wants to know more, for sure go to the Media Literacy Clearinghouse and click on a category, and you will find recommended books for the library or for the professional collections.
Got it. So let's see what comments and questions our team members have for Frank about this grand tour through his curated list of media literacy books. What comments and questions do you have? Okay, so I have one question, which is, Frank, so clearly you took us on a genre-focused tour because there are actually specific kinds of knowledge and beliefs that are part of understanding advertising, understanding film, understanding newspaper, media history, media and film. What are, from your point of view, what are the strengths and weaknesses of media literacy books that tackle the topic generically or by media form? What are the strengths and weaknesses of books that focus on a particular genre or media form, from your point of view?
I think each of these books is limited only by the amount of space a particular author has to introduce that topic. I think you and I both know that there can't be everything you always wanted to know in a book about media history. Even the 100 media moments is only 100. You know, what about the 200 media moments? So I think it's extremely limited. And I do like books that have companion websites. You know, go to our website where you could explore more. But I think the book is always the jumping off point, asking more questions. What more do you want to know about film? What more do you want to know about stop motion animation? What more do you want to know about the day John Kennedy was killed? There are just so many fascinating facts out there. And I think teachers and school librarians have opportunities to go out there. The other thing, Renee, is what's missing. What did we not include in this webinar. And there are so many topics that I left on the cutting room floor, you know. So I was the gatekeeper, if you will. And I know you're going to introduce some books in a minute. So you were the gatekeeper. You and I both chose books that we thought these are worthy of our audience knowing about and follow. And by the way, don't take my recommendation. You as a school librarian or a parent, whoever you are watching this, you need to go deeper and go, well, yeah, that book looks, and has possibilities. So what do I need to know about that book? Are there other reviews other than School Library Journal, for example? What are people saying on Amazon? Can I trust the Amazon reviews? Contact the author. I love it when people write me and ask me questions about my book and have further questions. And so we're talking about media literacy. We're talking about questions. Isn't that what we want young people to do, is to ask questions? So I think a really good book, once we close that cover, says, what else do you want to know? And where am I going to go to get reliable, good information?
That is such a great point. And clearly that is the idea. How can the book inspire the intellectual curiosity and the questioning? So let me take 5 minutes and go through my list and we can kind of compare. I just made a pile. Mine are not so organized, and but I can say a few words about each one. I like this book a lot. It's called Lights, Camera, Action by Lisa O'Brien, Making Movies and TV from the Inside Out. You can see that this book is a really high interest book that addresses all aspects of the media process. It's got illustrations that are designed to help you understand the parts of the process. So even, of course, including the economics. I love it when books that take you behind the scenes don't skimp on the economics of media. So those books, when I look at books that are going behind the scenes, I always look for, well, are you going to explain to me how money gets made? Right? So I like this book for that reason. Very interesting book called Girl Director. Girl Director is a how-to guide for the first-time flat broke film and video maker. It's by Andrea Richard, right? And this is really a book for teenagers, but again, high-low, interest, written with lots of the kind of technical language and sort of stuff you might get in a film production class, helping you understand how to write a screenplay, how to use camera angles, how to edit, and of kind of a very fun way to invite kids to think about the possibilities for developing their own distribution mechanisms in this YouTube world that's kind of important. This is a really old one, but it's an oldie but a goodie. Media Madness, right? Media Madness, an insider's guide to media, right? So this is from Kids Can Press, and it's really it's a Canadian media literacy. It's a Canadian publisher's media literacy book. I think it's targeting 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. And it tries to tackle all the forms of media. So there's a little bit about advertising, a little bit about news, and so forth. I've got Neil Anderson's At the Controls, Questioning Videos and Computer Games. This is part of the Capstone series that you were describing. But one book that you didn't mention that I thought was kind of important was Spaceheads. Okay? Our friend John Sieska, the famous and one and only John Sieska, has developed a fictional book that is actually a digitally interactive book, because there are clues in this book that you have to go online to find, right? So it's a really interesting, but it's a media literacy book like no other, because it really involves aliens who are disguised as 5th graders, and they walk and talk like walking advertisements. right? And they are basically on a propaganda mission, and you have to figure out how they take over the world. And it's pretty hilarious and pretty engaging. Reality Boy. Reality Boy is a novel by A.S. King. And this is basically a kid whose parents agreed to put him in a reality TV show when he was young, and now he's a teenager, and the way everybody perceives him is based on what they saw in the reality TV show. And so it's almost like it's about recovering reputation and identity in a post-reality TV world. Really good. One that I can't find on my shelf because I must have lent it to somebody. I don't know who. Feed by M.T. Anderson. I believe Feed is the best young adult media literacy book of all time. It's a dystopic novel about a time in the near future when we don't need any cell phones or screen devices or TVs or billboards or anything like that, because we all get a chip implanted in our brain. And the chip delivers the media to us automatically, so that just walking around, it's like Google Glass, just walking around, advertising and entertainment, just thinking about things brings these media up. But it's a dystopic vision as this boy meets this girl, and she doesn't have the chip implanted for complicated reasons. What happens, right? It's a great read. It's disturbing as all hell. And I've never seen young adults have such a great discussion as they have about that book. Two pieces of nonfiction for young adults, high school students, that I strongly recommend are Fame by Mark Rowlands. This is a very slender, you can see, a very slender, easy to read book about the culture of celebrity. And I think as a way in to be thinking about how media intersect with identity, values, cultural norms, this book does a lot of heavy lifting and yet is super readable and a great book for high school students, I think. And then a kind of bizarre book, but I think I would love to use it with high school students, is this book called Lifespan of a Fact. It's a dialogue by John DeGata and Jim Fingal. Basically, he's the author and he's the fact checker. And what we learn in this book, and it's kind of written in a way where it's very, like there's two conversations happening. There's two conversations happening at the same time in this book. But the book is really about this postmodern world we live in where maybe facts matter or maybe they don't. And I actually think that right now kids are growing up in this world where maybe facts matter and maybe they don't. And that any opportunity to talk about how do we decide what to believe in, how do we know what's true, how and when and why does it matter that stuff is true or not? I think exploding those ideas in a high school classroom is a really powerful thing for kids. And this does it in a playful, fun to read way. It's like a dialogue between these two guys as each one tries to persuade the other that facts matter or that facts don't matter, right? So we got fiction on one side and nonfiction on the other, and they have a blast trying to duke it out. So I think it would be a lot of fun to teach with. All right, so that's my roundup of my favorite books. I want to welcome Gina Marcello, Elaine. Also, I see Lisa and Zoe. I wonder if you have any favorite media literacy books for learners of every age, or if you have questions for Frank Baker.
I think this is great. I had no idea when I saw the link. I just clicked on it. This is amazing right here that we're even able to do this and get together. So thank you.
So nice to see you, Gina.
It's nice to see you, Renee.
It's great to see you, Gina.
And Frank. Yeah, this is fabulous.
Renee, I'm thinking about the last book that you mentioned. Those two authors would be, I think, if we put them on a stage at a conference, not just a media literacy conference, a social studies conference, for example, where you have thousands of teachers there, and you let the conversation go and you allowed the audience to ask questions, but you streamed the whole thing, and then you invited others in on the conversation. I love the fact that it's a book, but I'd love to take that idea even further, and you guys planning conferences, take the idea and run with it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Gina.
Yeah.
No, are you going to list the books anywhere? Are you going to type them up and send them out by any chance? Because there's a couple of them that you mentioned I would really like to read this summer.
Lisa's doing her best to keep a Google Doc, Gina, and if you open up the chat box,
Okay.
you'll see that link. Frank, we think that your curated list that you've presented here is absolutely powerful for teacher librarians, but I think it would also be very valuable for parents as well, right? Absolutely.
As I said, I go to these conferences, and it's a technology conference, it's a social studies, a math conference. I pick up a math textbook, and I look up television ratings, not in the math textbooks, and I go, why not?
Right.
What is a television rating? What is a share? They are percentages.
Right.
Why aren't math teachers? Why don't we include the fact that the television industry relies on ratings, and including that in a simple math textbook, where I've tried to do this before to math teachers. Ask your students what's your favorite genre? Oh, I like reality. Well, go look at the top Nielsen top 25 and see what, which one's got the highest ratings and which one's got the lowest rating. And what is a rating? What is a share? Most students have no idea. Yet those numbers are watched by television and advertising executives all over the country, and local television stations as well. They set advertising rates. The politicians, I just did a workshop with social studies teachers in which I said, did you know that Chris Christie bought 30 Seconds of Time and WMUR in Boston? He paid $500, but a super PAC bought the same time and the same newscast and paid $5,000. And why the difference? Students could really be diving into this stuff. And Renee, I love the fact that you said that behind the scenes book, you look for the economics. That is so critically important. All media are involved money.
Yep.
Somebody's making money, and it's like, who's making the money? And in a revision of my latest book, I'm writing, do students even know what dark money is? Do they understand the phrase dark money? And why is it important that we know who is funding these campaigns that are all over the airwaves?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing to think about how most of the books that you showcased and that I showcased as well are books that are available to librarians through the school library business, but maybe not the kind of books that I'm going to see at the Barnes & Noble when I go to the children's section, right? So I think that this helping, I think we all probably need to have a better understanding of books that are marketed to the library trade versus books that are marketed to the general public. And those really are two different markets, right? Which is probably why most people have not heard of Learner Press, Capstone Press. These are books that are sold to the library trade. So in a way, you started this webinar, Frank, by saying how absolutely central school librarians are to the practice of media literacy for elementary and secondary kids. And it's with books like this that are designed to help bring these ideas into the elementary and secondary classroom that media literacy can really get some traction. So in some ways, the next step is really, I think, with authors like John Cheska, right? So this is a popular book, right? Targeting a mass audience, and it will be exciting to see how media literacy gets woven in to stories that are targeting beyond the library press. That's partly I was so pleased to see the Reality Boy book, and I think if we looked hard for young adult novels that addressed technology dystopia, we could have a whole nother webinar, couldn't we, Frank?
Well, you know what I love, Renee, is when these publishers devote time to creating a study guide or a teacher guide or an activity guide. They realize that the book is the jumping off point and I think the school librarians can do the same thing. They can look at a topic of a book and say, what else can I do with this topic? And where does it, I think it all goes back to standards. I think the fact that we haven't had lots of books on the shelves in school libraries is because the standards have been deficient. And I'll say it again, standards have been deficient. But despite that, there are some excellent books out there. And I like it when school librarians realize, hey, I don't have a book on the shelf that tells students how they could use their mobile phone for social activism. Wow, you mean I could take a picture or create a PSA and distribute it out on the web and something would happen as a result of what I did? That is so absolutely powerful. I mean, you and I know, and the others who get media literacy know, that there is power in media. You're getting a wave at Hun. My wife just came in to snap a picture.
I'm giving Barry a hug there.
Everybody do the wave. Everybody do the wave from my wife, Tech. But is it? So what we're really talking about here is I think not only educating kids to media and media topics, but motivating them to want to do something as a result of the knowledge they've gained.
Right. Such a great point. And of course, isn't that exciting and a great way for us to end? We think that publishers have a whole bunch of topics that need to be part of the game of media literacy. We just introduced one. Maybe we can spend our last 5 minutes brainstorming. So Frank, you want to see a book that helps kids know how to use their cell phones to engage in political activism? I love that. What else would we like to see media literacy books on? I would like to see a media literacy book that explains about big data and how my Facebook or my social media gets personalized. I think a book that goes behind the scenes to explain algorithms would be awesome.
I'm totally with you there. Recently, I had an experience that blew me away. I wanted to fly to Sarasota, Florida, so I had booked my trip on Orbitz. And immediately I went to the New York Times website, and on the upper right-hand corner of the New York Times website was an Orbitz ad that said, looking for a trip to Sarasota. And I thought, wow, this is not a coincidence, right?
There you go.
The problem was I'd already bought the ticket, so why are they marketing to me now? I already bought the dang ticket. So. But your point is well taken, that young people do not realize that their footprints are all over the place. Someone is interested in targeting them from birth to death.
So we'll ask our friends who've joined us tonight, Zoe and Elaine and Lisa, what would you like to see, what media literacy topic would you like to see a book for every learner on? Lisa, Zoe, Elaine?
Well, since I'm interested in media literacy and diversity, I would love to see a book that would talk about diversity in the media.
That's a great, and you know what? I have not seen a great book on media literacy and diversity that's targeting high school students or middle school students or elementary school students. That's a great observation.
So I'll have to write it.
Maybe.
I was about to say.
Maybe.
Can you get it written in the next year?
Offline, yeah, Frank, you can help Lisa figure out about finding a children's publisher or a young adult publisher for that. Zoe, can you think of a topic that you think maybe there should be a media literacy book about for younger learners?
I was also thinking about the social media kind of analyzing the culture and the participation in social media for kids. And also I was wondering if there's any book already exists that for parents or seniors learning about the new media and social media literacy for them, and how they can communicate with younger generations and the kids, maybe their kids or grandkids.
That's fascinating. So when we say you wonder what about seniors? Cool idea.
You should definitely look at the Dummies series, because I think there are several books in the Dummies series, and they get revised quite often.
That's a great point. That's certainly a great point. Okay, well, we've reached the end of our time here. We have just spent an hour talking about great media literacy books for every learner, featuring the amazing Frank Baker. Frank, I want to give you a round of applause for sharing your insights with us. We are going to post the list of books, thanks to our friend Lisa Friesum, up on the Media Education Lab website. This is the last Media Smart seminar of the spring semester, so we won't see you until the fall. Media Smart seminars are free. They're offered online and sponsored by the Media Education Lab. We'll be busy this summer, though, because in just about 8 weeks from now, we'll be hosting the 4th annual Summer Institute in Digital Literacy. That's July 24th through 29th on the downtown campus of the University of Rhode Island in Providence, Rhode Island. About 120 educators, librarians, media professionals, college faculty from all over the country and all over the world are going to be coming. We hope you might consider joining us. You can learn more at mediaeducationlab.com. Do go to the Media Literacy Clearinghouse, frankwbaker.com/MLC, and see all the amazing resources. I've always said, Frank, you're the most amazing media literacy librarian on planet Earth. And tonight,
thank you, Renee.
You really showed that to us. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks to you guys for watching. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good night.